Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you for agreeing to host this, session today, which is on ICTs for monitoring climate change. I'd also like to thank the panel and also thank our host, British Telecom, and of course the ITU for putting this on. What I'm going to cover in the session is 4 key points. The first is the challenges of monitoring climate change. And the previous speaker, Michel, from the EU, he actually touched on some of the problems and the challenges that we face towards the end of his presentation. So thank you very much. It makes my life easier because I can now rush through that material. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of ICT in monitoring. We're going to talk about what Microsoft is doing in certain areas, our contributions and the assistance that we're providing. And lastly, I'll wrap up talking about some of the work that we're doing with the United Nations Environment Programme. And in deference to our panel chair, I'm going to keep this session short. And so I'm not going to get to cover all the information I'd like to cover. So if you have any questions, please do come up and see me afterwards. I'll be more than happy to give you my card or provide more information. Some of the challenges that we need to discuss are that monitoring will take place over an extended period of time. We're not talking weeks here or months. We're talking years, decades, potentially even longer. If you consider that there's a goal to reduce emissions levels by half of 1990 levels in 2050, that means we've got 60 years to monitor of data. 60 years of climate change information we have to capture and make available in research and delve into. And multiple data points are going to have to be collected. Many organizations will be involved in this collection. No one organization can do it on their own. And that presents unique challenges in itself. Number one, vast sums of data are going to have to be collated and stored and collected. And organizations are going to have to be able to share that information with each other effortlessly in order so as not to impede the research into climate change. The data collected is going to come in multiple formats. That's unquestionable. There'll be things such as satellite imagery, weather sensors, sea levels, and so on. And in order to make sure that we can still make use of that data in the future, we need to store it in formats today that are lasting and standardized. The ICT industry in general is very good at creating proprietary formats of one type or another, which can't be accessed a few years later. And e-discovery, which is my previous role as part of information security, is one classic example where you're required to provide data from a system that might only be 3 or 4 years old, and yet you don't even have access to software tools to do that. So we need to be storing this information in standardized formats, preferably formats ratified by the ISO or IEC. This data must be analyzed and qualified. There's going to be a lot of data, but not all of it is going to be climate change related. There will be erroneous or stray data in there, or data which is just not a factor and needs to be removed. And to do that, you can apply business intelligence style tools in order to actually work out what is climate change data and what's not. But this will be complicated by the variety of the formats of data used, the volume, and also the past historical data, which we might not be able to identify as being climate change related or not related. So how can information communication technology organizations help with monitoring climate change? Well, we're going to help in a number of different areas. Data collection, transfer, storage, collaboration, processing, and management are the key ones. The point I'd like to really make here is that there's no need to go out and buy proprietary systems. For a number of research projects, the current off-the-shelf hardware and software, be it commercial or open source, is actually more than adequate. You don't have to go and buy proprietary packages for this monitoring or for the processing or analysis of data. And this even today extends up to supercomputing, because supercomputing is now a commodity. There's a number of supercomputer options available to you that can be built using just commercial PCs and servers bundled together and tied together into compute clusters. There's no need to go out and buy expensive equipment to do this stuff. So a lot of the research can actually be conducted today using off-the-shelf hardware and software, commodity hardware and software. And I'd also like to make a point that some might think is somewhat contentious, but climate change itself can bring new opportunities for ICT companies because the scale of the challenge is so huge that ICT companies working in this space are going to get exposure to volumes of data and types of data which they're not going to get anywhere else. And this is an opportunity for them to hone their business intelligence tool sets, their storage tools, their database products, and so on, So while we can actually contribute by making software donations and providing free assistance to international organizations and NGOs, we are actually going to learn a lot back, and we're going to get back a lot of information that can be turned into enterprise class products in the future that we can sell to enterprises. So somewhat controversial, but there may be an ROI for ICT in actually participating in climate change. Here we have an example of a very common quoted use of ICT in monitoring climate change, and it's satellite imagery. And what we have here on this slide is a picture of Myanmar before and after the cyclone that hit earlier on this year. The top picture shows the Irrawaddy Delta before the cyclone, and the one at the bottom shows the damage done. And you can see how satellite tools can be used to actually monitor things such as sea levels. In fact, in the ITU booklet, which is available outside the auditorium here, there's a great picture in there of sea level temperature within the Mediterranean. And that's another great example of how satellite imagery can actually be used to monitor climate change. In fact, it can show a number of things: deforestation, sea levels and flooding, as we see here, weather impact, CO2 emission sources, temperature. You can even see migration of species. It's amazing the quality and detail information you can get from satellite imagery. Of course, that goes back to the problem of the volume of data, the amount of data you're storing, how do you access standardized formats which are going to be accessible in 40, 50, 60 years. At Microsoft, we personally believe that the combination of software and technology will actually help improve the environment. And we are committed to providing software and tools to NGOs, to the UN, to governments, and so on. We believe that 2.5% to 3%, which is still growing, of energy consumed by software-driven devices can be driven down through better power management, through virtualization and the likes. We can use software to address the larger challenges, and we are partnering with leading environmental organizations, which I'm going to turn and talk to now. One of the projects that we're working on, which we're seeing tangible results from already, is called Flux Net. And this is a carbon emissions project which looks at the impact of carbon emissions on vegetation. And you can go to fluxdata.org and you can get more information about this project. And what we're doing is we're making available the storage and collaboration analysis tools which can be used, again, demonstrating that readily available software can be used to actually monitor and process and store all this data and facilitate collaboration between groups. Product teams within Microsoft are working on the challenge of reducing power consumption. Through better power management, we can actually reduce that 2.5 current currently loaded on the environmental greenhouse gas emissions. We can reduce that. For example, a common way would be to shut machines down in the evenings. But then people say, well, how do I apply software updates to my machines? How do I do audit checks? How do I do backups and so on? Well, your machines don't have to be running all night to do that kind of stuff. So you wake them up when you have to, using, again, the commodity hardware, the wake-on LAN, attributes which you'll find in most network interface cards, which aren't tied to the operating system. Works with Linux, it works with Windows, it works with Mac OS, you name it. It works with all of these things. We can actually remote wake up machines, do the updates or do the backups, and then shut them down again remotely. And that way you can actually just bring machines up for the time you need them at night. So you no longer have to tell your workforce, leave your machines turned on at night. So there are actually solutions that we can do today to actually reduce ICT's own impact on the environment, in addition to providing tools and research and so on. What we're also doing is we're making available our live Earth, that's our satellite imagery, available free of charge through APIs. So no longer do you have to worry about actually storing the data yourselves or buying the images. You can actually get access to them using the APIs off the web. And of course, that means you can get access to them from anywhere in the world. You no longer have to have a data center to store this data. It's going to be stored in the cloud. There's also SkyDrive for data storage and Office Live for collaboration. And these are tools which we're actually wrapping up and making available for researchers into climate change and people who are monitoring climate change. Another example of work that we're doing, which actually builds upon some of these tool sets and APIs we're making available, is work we're doing with the Clinton Foundation, where we're building tools that will help cities track greenhouse gas emissions. And this is on target for release to 40 cities this year. And it will allow cities to actually track, through satellite imagery, greenhouse gas emissions by building. And then they can actually work out which buildings are worse than others and then work with the builders and the architects of buildings to see what did they actually do to improve the building design to reduce greenhouse gases. Was it LEED Gold or LEED Platinum, for example, building construction? The tool set can also be used to run what-if scenarios. For example, let's say you replace your diesel bus fleet with a hybrid fleet. What impact would that have on greenhouse gas emissions for your city, your municipality? And it allows you to compare different cities throughout the world, and this is being rolled out and made available as we speak. And you'll see a lot more information on this come out in the next few weeks and months. Turning specifically to what we're doing with the United Nations Environment Programme, we're working on a project right now called HOWIE, and I always get this wrong because there's 3 programs which are very similar. HOWIE is online access to research in the environment, and this is a system which allows researchers throughout the world who are qualified to get access to environmental data stored and maintained by UNEP, Yale University, and others. It actually contains research in a number of key areas, and the ones which are pertinent to what we're discussing here today are climatology, climate change, meteorology, energy conservation, and renewable energy. And that's just a small subset of the type of research data that is available. And as I said, if you're a qualified individual, you can get access to this content free of charge. And Microsoft has contributed both the software, the hardware, and the services to actually facilitate this. And right now, we're working on version 2. Somewhat related are 2 sister projects called HOWIE and Agora. HOWIE is about access to health data for doctors, nurses, medical researchers in the third world. One of the negative, truly negative impacts of climate change will be rising temperatures, which will allow disease to spread. For example, right now, disease is often bounded by climate zones. But with growing world temperatures, you might see a lot of equatorial diseases creep up into the northern and down into the southern hemispheres. And it's going to start impacting countries which are technically classified as third world countries, which have not yet had to deal with those diseases, and they're going to spread. And so tools like HOWIE are actually going to allow doctors in those countries to see medical best practices, which they wouldn't otherwise have access to deal with the negative impacts of climate change, such as spreading disease. And Agora concentrates on sustainable agriculture and farming practices and gives access to governments and to organizations in third world countries to help them actually do sustainable farming while reducing the impact on the environment. We're also working with UNEP to develop tools for collecting, monitoring, and modeling the planet's life support systems. And by life support systems, we're looking at, in specific, biodiversity loss. Now, unfortunately, whenever you're approached in the street or you see a magazine campaign or a television commercial for biodiversity loss, it's always like a cute little furry animal. Well, unfortunately, that's not the planet's life support systems. The little furry animal, that's actually quite high up in the food chain. And what we're talking about is really ugly, nasty little insects and microbes and bacteria and stuff that you really don't want to see under an electron microscope. You see the picture of the bed bug with all its tentacles and hairs and stuff. Well, that's actually what we're looking at here. We're actually looking at the lowest elements of the food chain to see how climate change impacts them. Whether plankton can survive in a warming Antarctic ocean. The answer is no, they can't. Well, what happens if plankton die? Well, actually, all the species that feed on the plankton die, and then all the species that feed on the species that feed on the plankton die, and then all the species that feed on the species that feed on the species that feed on the plankton die, and so on and so on. You get the point. Eventually, what happens? No fish stocks worldwide, no whales, no nothing. So we're looking there with UNEP about biodiversity loss. We're also working on the World Conservation Monitoring Center to build a world database in protected areas. And this tool set will allow both public and private sectors to conduct a risk assessments on the impact of activities, including activities that either cause or are driven by climate change. For example, let's say you choose to rebuild your city because it's currently in a floodplain. What is the environmental impact of rebuilding your city, moving it up a few feet or a few meters above the floodplain? Is that actually an area of special scientific interest? And providing access to that kind of data. So in summary, and I had to rush a lot, I do apologize. This is a pivotal time for environmental action. It's time to get involved. Unfortunately, environmental action is also considered somewhat sexy, and we actually, I think, face a long-term problem in keeping people energized and involved. So right now is the time to get people involved, make them understand the impact, and keep them involved. We believe that software can be used to solve that 95% problem. Microsoft is committed to providing energy-efficient products by reducing ICT's own impact on the environment. And what we're doing is we're giving away tools and resources without charge to research organizations and the like. All the IP that we have about our green data centers that we're building, we're making available through our IT showcase free of charge, for example. We're publishing white papers on strategies which can help ICT itself reduce impact on the environment, and how ICT can be used to monitor climate change and solve some of these challenges and problems, such as what we're doing with UNEP and the Clinton Foundation. I invite you to visit this website if you have any questions, microsoft.com/WAC environment, or you can contact me directly, jhowie@microsoft.com. Thank you.